Okay, Dave Paulides, Canam Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for our video channel. Had something funny just happen here. Huck backed her way into that corner and there was a big poster behind it. And the poster fell on her and just about freaked her out. Yeah. Hey, you a good girl? Oh, you're a good girl. Yes, a good girl. Okay. She's going to be hanging out with us. And the poster that fell on her. And oh boy, she did not like that poster falling on her. So, anyhow, back to the real world. And Dave Paulides, Canam Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. And this is a missing person segment. And Huck is going to be right here next to us, making sure that I do everything right. She's got a strategic position now, so nothing can fall on her. She's right here. Good job, Huck. Good job. Yes. So, we will take it away. And most of you know, I just came back from Kentucky, Cincinnati, doing that MUFON conference. Let's talk about that for a second. MUFON, UFOs, Mutual UFO Network. Super smart group of people. They tend to think that there are aliens out there and that the aliens can come and visit you and take you, disrupt your life, implant your mind with ideas. Then there's another group of people out there who don't think that can happen. And I had a lot of people at this conference come to me and say, Dave, do you ever think that people are given an idea and that they follow the idea and go out and find the people with the implanted idea? Yes, I have thought that many times. And in fact, people have told us over the years that this has happened. They wake up from a dream and they go and they find a missing person. Sometimes they don't even know who it is. Now I have other people out there in the village who say, Dave, do not listen to psychics. They're devil worshippers, or they're evil, or they're satanic, or etc., etc. So I asked you, the villagers, what is the difference of somebody waking up from a dream who's never seen anybody, doesn't know the people, and then takes the searchers right to the location where the person was found, versus somebody who says, yeah, I don't know why, but some people will call me a psychic or a sensitive, and I get ideas in my head and I don't know how I get them, but I get them, and I tell people what I see and what I hear and what I feel. What's the difference between those two people? I don't know. I don't know. I read almost every post that's made on every video. If you're looking at the video screen, bottom left, you can make a comment on the video. The #1 comment on every video is usually mine. And it's important that you read those comments, because I've learned as much from reading the comments as I have from doing my own research. And it continues a dialogue between you and the village and other villagers and friends. It's a healthy place to kind of kickstart things and get them going. I really wish that all of you would participate. Now, The people out there that make comments on the video, that's great. But you don't read the comments. You don't read my comment, and you don't read the other comments. And 9 times out of 10, if I've been on that page, I've answered your comment or your question about the video. Now, on missing people, you go, well, Dave, what was the condition of this or the condition of that? I give you everything I know about those videos in these presentations. If I knew, I would tell you. Sometimes older articles and search and rescue reports give very little information. So, for what it's worth. Now, the cases today. As I've told you before, the early part in U.S. history, from say 1920 to 1950, there were a lot of really unusual cases that are almost cookie cutters of each other. And if you've been following me, you know what I mean. Let's see if you can pick them out this time. A little tiny girl, 2 years old, named Virginia Harmon. This appears August 2nd, 1921 at 9 a.m. She lived in a little farmhouse surrounded by cornfields on a road called Manslick Road, just south suburb of Louisville, Kentucky. Today, I think it's still part of Louisville now. It's a little suburbanite location, but back then, it was way out in the sticks. It wasn't in the city limits of Louisville. It was in the county. Now, the wife and the husband had separated. A key important point here. When I look back, and I've done this, at many of the disappearances of little kids, the husband isn't around. It's a large percentage, significant percentage. The husband isn't around. Child's just with the mom, or child's with an aunt and uncle, or the child's with the grandparents. So August 2nd, 1921, 9 a.m., Virginia's playing on the front lawn of the farmhouse. Farmhouse is 200 yards from the nearest road. Pretty mundane behavior. 9 a.m. Obviously, kids playing, warm August day. Miss Harmon needed some water. So she told Virginia to stay there, and she was going to go walk over to her sister's house. A really short trip, 5 minutes there and back. And Miss Harmon told everybody that Virginia had just recently learned how to walk, so she toddled around, not very fast. So she went to her sister's home to get the water. She returned home within 5 minutes, and Virginia was gone. She went back to her sister's and immediately got her sister's name was Mrs. George Cummings. And her sister got a whole series of neighbors, ranchers, farmers to respond. And they searched. And they searched the house, they searched around the house, they searched the area between the house and the fields. And what they didn't want to happen was her to be in the cornfields. Well, after a couple hours, they figured out they weren't going to find her. They're calling her name. She's not answering. There's nobody crying. And they called county law enforcement because this was in the county and it wasn't in the city of Louisville. The county arrives and sees the enormous task that they have to search, and they call Louisville police for assistance. And they get there and they start searching. Right away, the county stumbles across a young boy, 14 years old, named Philip Neiman. Now, Neiman was observed hiding around the Harmon farmhouse. And he starts to be questioned about Virginia. And he so infuriated the sheriff and the deputies with his answers that they arrested him. And they took him to jail, where he was interrogated by detectives. In the meantime, the search is going on. Police carefully search the house, because that's actually where kids are usually found. Carefully searches the area around the house. Carefully searches the area up to and including the fields. And what the detectives said is important. They said that there were no tracks leading away from the Harmon's front yard. Why is that important? Well, because that's where Virginia was. If you're a little girl, you got to toddle away, you got to leave tracks. So the police that night organized a super comprehensive search. She went missing at 9 a.m. Hundreds of searchers were at the farmhouse by 6 p.m. And what they decided to do is they were going to put one searcher in every row of corn. And they had hundreds. So within a short period of time, they had the entire field searched. And then they gave the task to some firemen that they were going to drag the creeks in the area. And there were several, just in case her body was in the creeks. And then Miss Harmon was questioned about the daughter. And she said, well, I don't think she can get very far because she can't toddle real quick. And that's what puzzled everybody. And that's why Neiman was a suspect, because they couldn't believe that they weren't finding the girl real close to the house. She wasn't crying, calling names, etc. Late in the night on August 2nd, the detectives were done with Neiman. They believed he didn't play a part in the kidnapping. They believed that he didn't know anything, and he was released back into the custody of his parents. Now, Mr. Harmon lived and worked on the other side of Louisville, but soon after the disappearance, his wife called him, and he arrived there at about 3 o'clock, and he became part of the search team. Late on that first day, it started to rain really hard. And Mr. Harmon's coming back from a field, and he's adjacent to a creek. And he hears a loud splash in the creek. He turns around and runs to the area of the splash. And he sees the water's disturbed, and he jumps in thinking his daughter's in there. And he starts flailing away, trying to find out what's in the water. There's nothing there. That bothered him greatly. So he gets out of the water, he comes back to the farmhouse, and he cleans up. The next day, the county sheriff had already called in more searchers, more police, more deputies. Every local in the area stopped farming, stopped ranching, and came to the Harmon Ranch. Now think about this. Hundreds of people are swarming around the farmhouse. They're in the area around the farmhouse, sitting down, taking a break. Hundreds of people can't fit in the farmhouse, so they are sitting in the area between the house and the field, along the road, everywhere you can imagine. Nobody's hearing anything. So early the next morning, on the 3rd of August, a local young man named William Arnold, he was actually a neighbor of the Harmons, gets up real early with his dog, and he's going to start searching. Now, the dog wasn't a search dog, it was just his dog to hang out with. And they're walking, they go to the house, and everyone's given an assignment where to go. And he goes down this one downhill area out to an area past the cornfields where he was assigned to search, but he's on his way out. And 100 yards away from the farmhouse, his dog starts growling. And they're in a grassy area, and the dog stops and is barking and growling in an area that is one big blackberry patch. Now, if you don't know anything about blackberry bushes, they have a lot of thorns. You don't want to walk in the middle of them. You get close to them, they'll scratch you bad. You know to walk away. Even a young child would know to walk away. But as he gets close to the blackberry patch, he looks in. He sees a body in there. It doesn't look like it's alive. So he goes in, and it's Virginia Harmon. He picks the young girl up, still asleep, and carries her back to the home. Now, what was interesting about that is that late on August 2nd, it rained really hard all over this farm area. And Virginia was wet. And it could have been because the ground and the grass and the area was all wet as well. So just laying there and rolling in it would have gotten her wet. But he picks her up and carries her to the mom's house. She doesn't even wake up while he's carrying her. He doesn't even know if she's alive. But as he gets to the farmhouse, he gives Virginia to the mother, and she says one word, "Mommy," and then goes right back to sleep in her arms. She had scratches on her legs and her arms, and law enforcement said that that area had been searched multiple times. 100 yards away. How did anybody miss that? Come on. And the point I made that I really want you to understand, it isn't that it could have been missed. It's just a searcher could have been sitting right next to it, resting. Because as I said, not every searcher comes all the way back to that house to rest and drink a cup of coffee or have a sandwich. They rest in that area where it's wide open, big search zone. Now, there was a creek right nearby that had water. It had rained the night previous. The area had been previously searched dozens of times. And William Arnold's dog was growling. But she said it didn't normally do. So why was it growling at Virginia? Was there something that the dog sensed in that area? Was there an odor coming off of her that we couldn't sense? But what would make the dog growl? And I've thought about this a lot. Now I know Huck. We took Huck to the river the other day. And there's a bunch of kids, 5 to 8 years old. She loves kids. And kids always come over and want to play with her and pet her. That's great. And every once in a while, she'll go down on her feet and she'll look at him and she'll bob her head and she wants them to play with her, like chase her and do that. And then if they won't and they walk away, she'll go rrr, and her tail will be going ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch. And she's happy, but it's more like to get the kids' attention. But people who don't know think the growl is mean. Not her. Not with kids. Never. It's one thing about my Great Pyrenees. I know she would not hurt a kid. And I could just tell because she loves kids. But in that same sense, maybe William Arnold's dog could sense it was a child as well. Now, one thing about small kids that you got to remember, there was no mention if Virginia was fully clothed. But a child at 2 years old, fully clothed after 24 hours, it's a guarantee that that child had a full diaper, which meant that the odor would have been pretty good for a canine to pick up. And that's something I always think about on these searches, is that why didn't the dogs pick up that scent? And why did William's dog act the way it did? Well, Mrs. Harmon said that she was very grateful. Parents were very grateful. Said that Virginia really couldn't speak. She was too young. She could barely walk. and they knew she couldn't walk well in that area nearest the farmhouse was searched intensely. Which goes back to me. This is the only picture I could find of Virginia. I've stated this before, I will say it again. A lot of the young girls in the early 1900s that disappeared, a lot of them had really short hair. And I always wonder if whatever is happening here, could they have mistaken them for boys? Just my thought out loud. And then the location of Manslick Road. This is where it is. This is downtown Louisville. This is really just a suburb now of Louisville. And then you got the Ohio River right here, close, and there was a lot of creeks and streams in this area as well. It's still pretty rural, considering. So there's a story for you. Matches our profile perfectly, and thankfully, the good Lord gave us a child back alive. Last name was Harmon. Next story. Happened just 30 miles north of the Tennessee border. A little boy named Charles Poston, 3 years old, missing June 19th, 1934 in the afternoon. What'd you think, Huck? Yeah. And the family lived 2 miles northeast of Hungry Mother State Park in Virginia. Now, Charles, just 3 years old, wandered from an extremely rural home with the family dog. And he was last seen in that family home. Yeah, I'll let you out. Sure. Here you go. Well, I hope you're not as bored as Huck was. She got tired of listening to me rattle. So, Mrs. Poston was home alone. She contacted neighbors. Again, Dad not home. And within just a couple hours, there were 200 people on scene searching. Where is this spot? Hungry Mother State Park. That's kind of a strange name, I gotta admit. This is Tennessee right in here. Right in this area. In this area right here, starting at that border, going south, has a lot of kids that are disappeared that I've written about. A lot. All right? So the family lived very close to that state park in a very, very rural area. Well, everyone's searching. It's been a couple hours. And what comes back? The family dog. Dog returns home with a snake in his mouth. They didn't say what kind of snake. Well, they sat the dog down, tried to separate it from the snake, and the dog would leave the front yard where Charles was last seen. This scenario has replayed itself dozens and dozens of times in my books. Dog returns, little child gone. But then there's also times where the child disappears and the dog is found laying right next to the child. Whether the child was dead or alive, the dog stayed with the child. Not only to protect it, but companionship. Who knows? Dogs don't usually leave little kids. And to hear this dog come back with a snake. Well, the county sheriff arrived not too long after that. And the county sheriff called for the park officials, park law enforcement. And they gave the search and rescue over to a Lieutenant Travis from Virginia State Parks. He immediately called for canine teams and got him there within an hour. And they started to search into the night. And then Lieutenant Travis called for CCC teams to respond and assist. Well, the canine tracker said that there was no scent trail of Charles leaving that front yard area. Then they brought trackers in and they couldn't find any tracks leaving that front area. Well, I'm sure at this point, Lieutenant Travis is hearing this information from his experts. He got a hold of detectives who were responding and arrived at the scene, and they start questioning Mrs. Poston. Pretty typical. They want to make sure all their T's are crossed, I's are dotted, and that there isn't any strange stuff going on between the parents and the child. Well, late that night, they cleared the parents of any wrongdoing while searching was still going on with lanterns into the night, calling out Charles's name, doing everything they could to whack the bushes, and the bloodhounds stayed on scene all night, and they just weren't getting anything. The quote from the lieutenant was, "Every foot of possible ground was searched." And then early the next day, heavy rain fell in that area. Sounds just like every other missing person case, doesn't it? Well, searchers didn't care. They stayed on scene. They didn't leave. A new group of searchers, 100 more, came in really early the next day. And Lieutenant Travis stayed on scene through the night the next day, organized searches, didn't go home. And a neighbor of the Postons who searched the day before came back, was given an assignment, and he decided, I'm going to go my own way, look for my own thing. I think I'll have better luck. His name was Willie Burchett. And he was hiking in a place called Walker's Mountain, 2 miles from the Poston property. Said he was walking along, and from a distance he heard a loud cry. And he turned around and he thought it was from behind him. And he thought it was odd because he had visually searched everything in the immediate area of where he was walking and did it conscientiously. So he turns his back and he walks back 25, 30 feet, and he sees a little boy laying in a bed of ivy. And as Burchett got closer, this little baby started to cry louder. Well, realizing he's looking for a little boy named Charles Poston, 3 years old, he leans down and picks up the little boy. Said that the little boy was damp, but not as wet as he should have been if he was out all night. And by direction, he was transported to the home of a Dr. Holmes for medical attention. Now, Willie said something really unusual, that there was hardly any clothes on the boy. Virtually almost nothing. Doctor said he had a possible cold. I suppose that's possible. And law enforcement made a statement to the press. Search parties were out since yesterday and had passed that child's location many times. Well, you know who else who passed that location without seeing him? It was Charles Poston. And the question I have for everybody, was the child there when the other people passed him? And was the child there just this last time. When will he passed her? Probably not. Without the cry, I doubt anybody would have heard him. So this one was June 9th, 1934. Just over the Tennessee border in Virginia. Not a huge distance from Kentucky. Now this happened in 34. The other case happened in 1921. These cases are very, very similar to one another. And I know it's easy to excuse the canines and say, well, you know, the dogs just weren't good dogs. But friends, this has happened hundreds of times. And there's hundreds of other times where the canines did find the people. Because canines are good at finding people. Because canines like to get out there and find people. It's what their job is, and they realize it and they have fun. So no, searchers are not that bad. And canines don't fail that often. So, two good stories. Virginia Harmon, 2 years old, found alive. Charles Poston, 3 years old, found alive. The number of 2- and 3-year-olds that are involved here, stunning. Stunning. So, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'll notice, our research is all original. These stories didn't come out of any books. These stories were our research. And I'm sure you're going to see them and hear about them on other channels soon. But what I do is I appreciate you being here and watching it and giving me your time and watching it for the entirety. And even if you play it a second time, it helps too. Just play it, put it on in the background, it helps. I greatly appreciate you. Lastly, you go to the store today, go to the post office today, do some shopping, see somebody in distress, help them out. Be a good citizen, be a good villager. It'll give you a good feeling inside and make you realize why we're all here. In the meantime, be nice to your family and your friends. By the good grace of God, I'll be back soon. Paulides out.